inner teacher is available to each and every person. It is a voice of truth, straight from the Creator to you, and it rests within you. And the inner teacher is capable of guiding you through any perceived illusion or problem. It's important that we understand that this has always been available to us and always will be available to us. Even if you don't formally know about your inner teacher or haven't built that relationship with them yet, you do know that there have been times in your life where you have had an inner urging or an inner voice that guided you. But you can foster the relationship with this inner guide in such a way that you become a finely tuned intuitional instrument and can navigate through all aspects of life successfully. The ego distorts our perceptions, and the inner guide or the inner teacher helps us to see through those illusions into the truth. It's as if we have two separate voices, two separate intentions within us. Sometimes we don't hear things as a voice. Sometimes it's more of an impulse or a feeling, an intuitive pull. But we have to learn how to distinguish between those two, what I'm calling voices, because the voice of the ego is there to distract us in order that we have destructive elements within our personalities. Ultimately, the ego's goal is to destroy. Whereas the inner guide is like Ariadne's thread, that myth of Ariadne in the labyrinth. When you've got a thread to guide you through a labyrinth, it doesn't matter what the labyrinth is. You'll get out the other side. Even though the infinite is not responsible for the labyrinth that we're in, the illusions of this world, the infinite will not put up with us being lost without a way out. And so we have that thread, that silver cord, if you will, that enables us to find our way home at any moment of time and point of space. We have to acknowledge that it's there. And we have to understand that the voice of the ego and the voice of the inner guide are on two different channels, two different radio channels. And you can't tune into both of those stations at the same time. So when you're listening to the voice of the ego, you're not listening to the voice of your guide. When you're listening to the voice of your guide, you're not listening to the voice of the ego. To many people, it's impossible to tell the difference between the two, but that's just because they haven't disciplined their minds yet. And you can discipline your mind to tell the difference between the two. The ego always is rooted in attitudes, emotions, and actions based on fear, guilt, and anxiety. Whereas the inner guide is always based in emotions and actions rooted in peace, joy, happiness, resolution. That's why when you can learn to relax your body and relax your mind in the midst of any situation, you are capable of being guided through to the other side. The voice of your inner guide is the energy of resolution. Resolution energy always has the power to overcome anxiety, problem, tension, fear. It's very magical in nature. It can happen in ways that we don't understand with our own mortal minds. The ego always wants to make you believe that it's keeping you safe. That's why we think if I stop worrying, I'm not safe. If I relax, I'll be vulnerable. If I let down my guard, then I'm not safe. And those are the promises that the ego is making to us at all times. Listen to me, I'll keep you safe. And it never does. It never does. The tricks of the ego are so obvious once we get used to looking at them. Because when we have anxiety, fear, guilt, and then we listen to the voice that is emanating from those emotions, it's always telling us over here, do this, go there. And then we listen to it and we do it and we get in trouble. Then that voice says, "Why'd you do that? You're so stupid." And we never think to say, "Because I took your advice and I'm not doing that again. We never think like that. We listen to that voice and say, oh, you're right, I'm stupid. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. What's wrong with me? And we're still listening to the voice that's based in guilt and based in fear and based in anxiety. The first step is to check for those feelings. Do I have fear? Do I have guilt? Do I have anxiety? Is there tension? Then I know which voice I'm listening to. A Course in Miracles says that there's only two emotions, love and fear. Now, in the craft as I learned it, I had a teacher that didn't say it like that. I don't even think they knew what the Course in Miracles was. They said there are two emotions that are based on tension and emotions based on peace or relaxation. And it's really saying the same exact thing. It's the same metaphysical truth, no matter the source. It's all the same. If you're listening to inner promptings based on anxiety and tension, you're going into arenas that you don't want to be. Whereas if you're listening to promptings inside you that are based on relaxation and love, then you are going to where you want to be. The idea that love conquers all is simply the idea that you can relax tension. You can relax tension. If there's tension in your body, for me, it's usually located near my solar plexus or in my neck. So if I can just notice where the tension is and close my eyes, very briefly take a breath or two and relax that tension, that's love conquering fear or love conquering all. You can relax out of anything, but you can't relax out of peace. Peace is the constant. Peace is always there. And that's why the inner voice of your teacher is all-powerful, because it's always there, whereas the ego can be relaxed away. The ego also will be active when we have sadness, when we have depression, when we feel lack or like we're missing something. When we notice those feelings, if we make ourselves wrong for feeling them, that is more ego prompting. That's the game. I'm going to give you an insolvable problem, and then when you can't solve it, I'm going to say, what's wrong with you? I'm going to give you a bunch of tension, anxiety, fear, sadness, and depression, and if you can't find your way out of it, feel bad about yourself and wonder what's wrong with me. Why can't I figure this out? That's the ego's game. I'm going to present you with problems that you don't have solutions for, knowing full well that you're going to feel bad, that you can't figure it out. And then I'm going to perpetuate this with some sort of carrot and some sort of stick, so that you're always searching for something that you can't find and run away from perceived punishment that might be on its way. And that's how we live our lives. That's how the ego has us, on a treadmill. I'm running away from possible punishment and running towards something that I can't have. Whereas the inner teacher's constantly calling you to peace, constantly calling you to love, constantly reminding you how wonderful you are, how perfect you are, how there's absolutely nothing about the essential nature of you that needs to be changed. The only thing that you need to change is the voice you're listening to, the attitudes that you are attracted to. The ego is the ultimate addiction. Say you got really into a hard drug, like heroin or meth or something like that. It's not that after a while you don't know that this isn't good for you. You know it's not good for you. You just can't stop. You don't know how to stop. And the ego is the different type of hard drug. It's a socially acceptable hard drug that maybe gave you a high once and you've been chasing that high ever since. And the good news about it is that the program that you have to detox from the ego and to become free from the ego is already within you. And this particular program relies only on your ability to relax and your ability to listen and your ability also to relinquish, to say no to the so-called gifts that the ego is constantly offering you. Anytime you feel like your energy is being drained, you know that your ego is in charge. You know which voice you're listening to. And what do you have to do? Notice it and change your perspective immediately. Call upon that inner guide within you and say, I need help. I don't know what to do. And the prompting that you're going to get from that inner guide is stop and relax. Let it go. Don't figure it out. Let me show you. Aligning your thoughts with your inner teacher is aligning your thoughts with your creator. Aligning your thoughts with the ego is aligning your thoughts with insanity. Aligning your thoughts with nothing. That's ultimately what the ego is, nothing. It's a shadow. It has no substance. It can't exist by itself. It's a parasite. It's not real. It's not there. A lot of times when we talk about the demiurge, which is basically just the tendency toward having an ego and the matrix of all of our egos, when we talk about such things, people say, oh, it's like Satan then, this big force out there, and I'm trapped, and maybe one day I'll be saved. That's not it at all. There's no force. There's no force of the demiurge. There's no force of the ego. They're habits of thinking. That's all they are. It's a habit we got into a long time ago of perceiving ourselves as separate. And when we started perceiving ourselves as separate, we started to misuse our powers of creativity so that we projected our ideas onto the screen of space and interacted with them as if they were real. And then we started this massive hypnotic spell, this massive dream that we're all in. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. But because we're so smart, we're actually more than just smart, we're genius, we're brilliant, that we got to a point where we can't escape this illusion because we made it too perfect. That's why the infinite made sure that we had that thread. We had that teacher because the infinite knew how good we were and knew that we wouldn't be able to find our way out all by ourselves. But the good news is that we don't have to find our way out all by ourselves. We have to get to the point where we say, I don't understand it, so that we can recognize that it is an illusion, that it is insane, and that we do need to be guided and taught how to get back to our right minds. If you take an honest look at your thoughts and your actions, you will know which voice you're listening to. And if you feel bad about that, if you feel guilty about that, that's just another ego ploy to say, see how bad you are? Because that's not the voice of your teacher. The voice of your teacher is like, oh, come here. Come with me. I've got you. You're safe. Relax. Be at peace. Let me take care of all these illusions for you. You just have to remember who you are. That's the voice of your teacher. That voice reminding you that everything's perfect. Everything is safe. There is a way out of this problem, whatever it happens to be, and you're perfect. Once you realize that you're perfect, the way you were created, everything that's not perfect about you becomes meaningless, and you just drop it spontaneously. Everything that's not perfect about you isn't real. It doesn't belong. Say you have something that you've cooked, and it's caked onto the pan. You soak it, and then do a little scrubbing, and then you rinse it off. What came off? Not the pan. Everything that wasn't the pan is what came off. And that's a very crude example of how you can purify your own mind. When you don't allow the ego to be part of you anymore, then you recognize that there's no part of you that isn't perfect. The truth about you is absolutely perfect. The Creator sees you as absolutely perfect, knows you're absolutely perfect, doesn't have any condemnation whatsoever about you, regardless of what you think you did in this life. Even if you did something that you think was unforgivable, the Creator does not, will not, and cannot see it that way. And that is good news. That is good news. And that good news is what your inner guide is there for. Think of that page of cups in the tarot. That is your inner guide giving you the good news. And that good news is always available to you. And if you're not hearing the good news, it's because you're not relaxing and listening to it. Now, that's not to say that once you understand this and once you get in a good relationship with that inner guide and that you give yourself time in the presence of that guide each and every day, that all of your problems disappear, that all of the problems of the world just magically go away. No, you still have to make it through the labyrinth, or in Kabbalah, you still have to make it up the tree. You still have work to do. But now you're not doing things by trial and error. You're being guided. And whatever you need within any moment of that journey is provided to you. The good news is something that you have to refresh moment by moment as you find your way out of the illusion. Because if the illusion just disappeared, that would be fine. But the people that didn't know that they had an inner guide would lose you as a guide. You have to be here with everybody, finding your way through this in a way that helps them until they can find their own guide that is within them. You going out and telling everybody, you've got an inner guide, doesn't work with most people. Most people aren't where you are, where they have ears to hear such a thing. But if you're listening to your inner guide and you're finding your way through this labyrinth, other people are going to be following you, at least telepathically. We have to stop being allegiant to our egos. And we don't think we are, but we are. Anytime the ego gets us riled up about something, it's like we're saluting. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm here. I'm your royal soldier. Whatever you need. Well, get mad, get angry, get upset, get fearful, have an argument, be mean. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. But when we learn, you're nothing but a habit that I got into. Instead, I'm going to turn to that inner guide within me. I'm going to change that radio station. I'm going to listen instead to the good news from my inner guide. And that good news is always about relax. I got this. We've got this. Do this, go here, do that. Be kind, be gentle, be happy, be prosperous, be free, be helpful. When we first experience our inner teacher, it is sometimes confusing for us, as we've said before, to discern the difference between the two motivators in our minds. But as you start listening to that voice within you that is the voice of peace, you realize there really are only two voices. There's one that makes me tense and there's one that makes me relaxed. There's one that tends to solve problems and there's one that tends to create them. There's one that tends to have conflict involved with everything that it does, and there's one that tends to have resolution involved with everything it does. There's one that tends to be a mystical healer in any and every situation, and there's one that tends to be a troublemaker, and not in a fun way. The healing of your mind and the end of the ego's influence over you is something that is available to you. The more you listen to the voice for peace and learn to relax and be at peace in the presence of whatever's happening and ask that inner peace before you act, the more you do that, the more you recognize that you are not under the ego's influence, that it isn't difficult for you to say no to that voice, that it isn't difficult for you at all to release your allegiance to the ego. Those were just stories that you had about your life. This is going to be so hard. This is so challenging. But that's all ego. It's not hard. It's the easiest thing in the world to relax. Oh, I can't. I just can't relax. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You just close your eyes, take a breath, find the tension, tell it to relax. It has to obey you. The tension has to obey you. You just have to stay with it for a while. If you're conditioned to constantly go through your life in a tense state, it is very different, but it's not difficult. You have to remind yourself, this is easy. It's the easiest thing in the world for me to relax. It's the easiest thing in the world for me to listen to the voice of peace within me. This allows you to overcome doubt, because each and every time you listen to the voice of peace within you, things work out in mystical and wonderful ways. Each time you listen to the voice of tension and upset, fear and anxiety in your mind, things tend to get worse. And if you just notice it, take an honest look, the doubt dissolves immediately. I see, this is very scientific. This voice brings me resolution. This voice brings me problems. It's arrogant to think that tension is more powerful than peace. That's the voice of the ego, the voice of arrogance. When truth enters your mind, it does so in order for you to have peace restored to you. And remember that it's always a restoration. That's what redemption is, by the way. People get really weird about these words, these Christic terminologies, but redemption simply is relaxing. To redeem something is to take it back, to retrieve it. So to find peace is to redeem your mind, to redeem yourself, because that's your soul's natural state of being. Your soul is naturally in a state of peace. And if our consciousness is not centered in the soul, it's evident by the tension that we experience in our bodies and minds. So it becomes very simple. It's really not challenging. The power of love and the power of magic are the same thing. True magic, magic that works, is the power of love. And that's why so many types of so-called magic don't work. They work in that they get you riled up about something. They get that you love the ceremony of the thing. You love actually performing the magical ritual. But as far as having tangible results, really the only way to have tangible results is to work your magic in a state of peace where that mental shield is down. And when that mental shield is down and you're working magic in a state of peace, it can be instantaneous results. And the interesting part of that too is that very frequently the ritual side of it becomes less and less important. The ego's magic tends to be very high on ritual, very high on tension, very low on results. Whereas the soul's magic tends to be very high on results and usually very subtle in regards to ritual. Not that ritual's bad. You can have as much ritual as you like, but it's not the ritual that is the magic. The ritual is simply there as a communication device. Talismans are a communication device. Candles are a communication device. Ritual gestures are a communication device. Altars are a communication device. Robes are a communication device. Perfumes, colors, all of that stuff. They're wonderful and we use them. Have at it. It's great. It's wonderful. But they are simply devices of communication. And just like you don't bow down to your cell phone as if it is your creator, you don't bow down to the rituals or the ritual tools as being anything other than devices for communication between you and your deep mind. And that's where your teacher lies, in your deep mind. But so does your ego. The deep mind is simply the mind of habit. And so when we're listening to the voice of our teacher, we are establishing new habits. When we are listening to the voice of our ego, we're reinforcing old habits. Most of us already have those ego habits. The new habits of the inner teacher, which are the habits of our soul, are usually not as well established. Real magic is always an expression of love. Effective magic is an expression of love because love and peace are synonymous. They're the same thing. So listening to the call of your inner guide, your inner teacher, is natural. It's easy, it's simple, but it's a choice that you have to make. And you have to give up your allegiance to the fear and the anxiety and all of the things that are on that other channel if you want to listen to the voice of your teacher. But know that the voice of your teacher is always going to bring you the results that you want. The voice of your ego is going to continually reinforce the ideas of separation, anxiety, tension, grievance, etc. And I think we've all had enough of that. So let's try something else. Let's get involved with the thread of Ariadne that is going to lead us out of the labyrinth. And as we do it, we start to feel joy, we start to feel peace, we start to feel certainty, and other people, whether we realize it or not, start to follow our lead. And that's why we are here, is to be guides. We don't just do it for ourselves. It'd be easy if all we had to do is just do it ourselves. But people are watching us. So if you're listening to the voice of your ego, you're teaching them that. If you're listening to the voice of your inner guide, you're teaching them that. That's how much responsibility we have, each and every one of us. It's a wonderful thing to understand. There's no pressure on you. You can always do anything you will. You can listen to your ego all day long if you want to. There's no pressure. But knowing that you have an option, knowing that you have a choice, and knowing that you have a way out of any problem is highly empowering. And I invite you to work with this idea and see what kind of experiences that you have as a result of it. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, blessed be.